So let's check our frame of mind and be sure that we give rise to an intention, a proper intention, to listen to the teachings in order to put them into practice and be of great benefit to all beings, both in the short term and ultimately. We are in the Bodhicharyavatara text of Shantideva, and at this point we are in the 7th chapter, the chapter that starts the 3rd section, which is how to bring bodhicitta to fruition, how to bring it to perfection, how to make it increase. In the previous 3 chapters, the teachings were how to prevent it from decreasing, degenerating. And then the first 3 chapters were how to give rise to it in the first place. And so as you think about this, we can see that this threefold process of giving rise to bodhicitta, avoiding the downfalls of bodhicitta, and then bringing it to causing it to flourish, is a constant. It's our constant practice. It's not like 3 steps, is it? It's actually we give rise to it and then let it drift and disappear, or it becomes replaced by the afflictions and so on. So this is the practice that these three methods, the 3 methods, are really what constitute our practice life. And right now, we are in the diligence chapter, which is the first of the 3 chapters that teach us how to cause bodhicitta to flourish. And we've already discussed kind of what diligence means. Actually, the Sanskrit is the virya paramita. Virya means kind of like vigor, courageous determination, that kind of idea. And of course, what we are to be diligent with are all of the above, all of the previous 6 chapters. That's why it's important that we know what to be diligent in. Yeah. Each one of these chapters, like each one of the paramitas, depend on the previous for the integrity of its practice. So we should be aware that, like, what we should be diligent in is that we should be diligent in avoiding unskillful mental states. We should be diligent in recognizing when we say unskillful or unwholesome mental states have arisen, and be diligent in eliminating them, and be diligent in developing skillful mental states, wholesome mental states, and be diligent in sustaining skillful mental states or wholesome mental states. So that's what we should, that sort of, we can say that summarizes the object, or what it is that we are to be diligent at doing. And then, as Santideva, as he regularly proceeds in the topic, he discusses what diligence is in that manner, and then also what contradicts, what's contrary to diligence. Assuming that's what we're more familiar with, is what contradicts or what's contrary to diligence. And so he talked about laziness, which is the opposite of diligence, and what laziness means, and the 3 kinds of laziness. We already discussed that. And how to get rid of, how to antidote these 3 kinds of laziness. And so that whole process, or that whole section of the chapter makes up the first 31 verses. And then we started on the topics that are how to implement favorable conditions for diligence. And there are 6, as we mentioned. He mentions in verse 32, 6 forces, 6 strengths, or 6 forces to cultivate in as as being the driving force of diligence that will reinforce our vigor in virtue, reinforce our vigor in uprooting and purifying and avoiding non-virtue. And as he mentions here, they are aspiration, self-confidence, relinquishment, and joy, and earnest application, and exertion of control. Sometimes there's four forces and 2 strengths, but basically it's the 6 topics that make up the rest of the chapter. And so the first one, aspiration, we've already, we talked about that. All those teachings on aspiration took us up to the 46th chapter, 46th verse. Of course, as it's taught, aspiration is the root of all dharma, and the root of aspiration is understanding the relationship between causes and effects, which we can say on a practical language, we could say what the relationship is between positive virtuous actions and happiness, and the relationship between negative actions and suffering. And by contemplating this topic basically of karma, then that's called the root of aspiration. Then we learn how that will drive us to the practice of making, the wonderful practice of making aspirations. And so make sure that we have to make sure that we have the understanding of the role of aspiration and karma. This is, I think, it's true of Dharma practice in general. First, there's things to know, as we always talk about. The development of prajna begins with listening and studying, and then reflecting, contemplating what you've learned, what you've studied, and then becoming free of doubt or uncertainty or hesitation, having the confidence of thoroughly reflecting on a teaching. Then we are able to sort of apply it to the whole range of our experience. Basically meditating. We could also say acclimatizing to that teaching, merging that teaching with our mind. And so when we talk about karma, as well as the other basic Abhidharma teachings of Buddha. For instance, when we talked about laziness, one of the antidotes to laziness is a contemplation of impermanence. And so we need to understand how to contemplate impermanence. And then we also need to have the skill of a practitioner to know how to direct that contemplation or that reflection or remembrance of impermanence, how to direct that towards the target of our distractedness or laziness. That's one function, right? To antidote, say, in this case, say, worldly preoccupations by contemplating impermanence, that shines a light on that preoccupation, and it lessens it, understanding how everything is impermanent. That's on the one hand. We've antidoted that, in this case, counterproductive attitude, that laziness, even whether it's sort of lethargy or sleepiness or being too busy or having a craving for being sort of a need to be entertained all the time. So if we apply the teachings of impermanence there, then it reduces, antidotes the compelling nature of that laziness on the one hand. On the other hand, because it deepens our understanding of impermanence, so that say that a counterproductive circumstance that provoked us because of our learning and our memory, like, oh, I've got to shake this off, laziness, or I've got to cut through this, and so then you contemplate impermanence. Then that impermanence also deepens because you've used it. You've used it on your mind, and also because impermanence also happens to be true. It's not like a device or a skillful means, kind of a dharma gimmick to dispense or to overcome some negative tendencies. But you're actually employing the truth of impermanence. So then, in that case, then that laziness was an aid to your deepening appreciation of the truth of impermanence. And so these, from two different sides, they go hand in hand. We shouldn't always just be trying to kind of get rid of things with Dharma, but also those things that we also then can deepen our understanding of karma. We can say, I've been meditating on impermanence, but it's not doing anything to antidote my preoccupations, my compulsions. So then we need to understand deeper meaning and a broader meaning of impermanence, and really go into the really having a really serious conversation with ourselves about whether or not impermanence is true or not, and all of the ramifications of contemplating impermanence, all the different various ways to approach impermanence. And those are things that I'm kind of making certain assumptions that you've encountered them, but certainly you need to at least know where to find those teachings and deepen your understanding of them, and also by gaining familiarity with these basic teachings, such as impermanence and karma and the suffering of samsara, they become much more accessible in the moment. In the moment when we need them, when we need to antidote, we're not scrambling, wondering, oh, what to do. So this is, again, just to reiterate the value of learning. Learning means gaining the ability to create favorable circumstances, gaining the ability to reduce counterproductive circumstances. And that means in your life, with your present mind, such as it is. That's what we need to work on, is our present mind. Okay, now moving forward from this this aspiration, the force of aspiration or the strength of aspiration as a method to create conducive circumstances for diligence. Then there is the force of, I think it's called steadfastness, being steadfast. It means being steadfast means once you've made a commitment to do something virtuous, then you do it until it's done, until it's completed. Being steadfast. Okay. So actually this steadfastness, the force of steadfastness, Shantideva introduces it with the last two lines of verse 46. So this first two lines have to do with the previous section of, therefore I will aspire, which was the topic, and tend to virtue, and steep myself in it with great devotion. So by having gained confidence in the principle of cause and effect, then I aspire to and will abandon negative actions and aspire to virtue with a keen and focused interest. And the next two lines have to do with the next section, with force of steadfastness. And then he says here, with the method stated in the Vajradvaja, I will train in confident assurance. Okay, so if we can hear, we can go to the footnote, and this is a footnote. This is a sutra. It's in the Avitamsaka Sutra, which many of his quotations have come from previously. And here he says, this is a quote that he's referring to here, we should read here. It says, quoting, I think this one, Vajradvaja is a name of an individual. I don't know what kind. At one point there were either bodhisattvas or individuals came from all different directions to the Vairochana Buddha, and then Vairochana Buddha, the Buddha said to this one particularly, this Devaputra just means a son of the god, divine sons. He says, when the sun shines, O Devaputra, it illuminates the entire world, regardless of the blindness of beings and the mountain shadows. In the same way, bodhisattvas appear for the liberation of beings, regardless of the obstacles that these may present. So the theme of that quote has to do with the bodhisattvas, and the bodhisattva actions that we aspire for are not dismayed. Just like the sun, it doesn't matter if it's cloudy or whether it's shining on people who can't see, or shining on a mountain and creating a shadow. It just illuminates the world. And so the bodhisattvas, regardless of, are not dismayed. Bodhisattvas are not dismayed by those who are ignorant or foolish or rebellious to virtue. But just like the sun, you just keep moving. So the bodhisattvas then mature all beings who are capable of being liberated. So then, so then he uses that quote, and it's a quote particularly that's suitable here, and with the method, meaning with the courage and the unflappability, using the metaphor of the sun, I will train in confident assurance, or confidence. I will train in confidence and assurance and determination. So we should tell ourselves again and again that we will complete whatever positive actions we began for the sake of others, actions that we undertook for the sake of others, that we will complete them. And then in the 47th verse, these 1, 2, 3, these 3 verses here are sort of general comments about this topic of steadfastness, and then it gets into the specifics. So then 47 says, "Let me first consider my reserves to start or not to start accordingly. It might be better not to start, but once begun, I should not then withdraw." So, of course, these also, we can also see the kind of karma that we need to cultivate, kind of habits we need to cultivate, as Shantideva says here. So we should take stock of our resources, both our spiritual resources and our temporal reserves. And he said here, he's saying, if better not to start, if we're unable to start, then we should maybe take another look. And if it's a worthy endeavor, but we're not capable, then we can begin to acquire the capacity to engage in what will benefit others. We want to make an offering, but we don't have an offering, and so then we figure it out and not be thwarted by our temporary poverty, the poverty, mental poverty also. In this, as he says in the next line here, "For if I do such things," in other words, if I start something and then back off, as it says in the last line of the previous, "But once begun, I should not then withdraw." I shouldn't withdraw from my commitment or withdraw from my promise. "For if I do such things," that is to say, if I back off, if I let it go, then the pattern will return in later lives. The pattern will return in later lives, and sin and pain will grow, and other actions will be left undone, or else will bear a meager fruit. So again, now this our appreciation of karma comes into play in sort of fortifying our steadfastness here by understanding that what's called there's one, like I talked last time about different ways to look at karma, different ways to judge karma, and different ways to interpret and understand karma. And I think particularly I talked about the intended action and stored action, and then I'm sure, you know, if you've looked into karma, then there's many different windows to look through, to see, to begin to understand this very complex, well, it's even Chigmalinpa says that it's impossible to understand actually why things occur based on what causes, you know, because they're infinitesimal, they're infinite causes. So in any event, so here there's what's called the one aspect of karma is that actions bear fruition. Actions come to the effect of actions. One way that they mature is that the effect is similar to the cause. The effect of an action is similar to the cause, and that carries on lifetime after lifetime. We kill in one lifetime, and so that when we take a rebirth, then that habit of killing, or that killing, becomes reinforced. It's easier to do something like that. And so here he says, for if I do such things, the pattern will return in later lives. And so we will, if we give up on our promise to benefit others, to practice virtue, if we give up on that, then that pattern will bring about this effect similar to the cause, and it'll be easy for us to give up things in the future. We'll promise to do things and fail to follow through on them. And it says sin here, meaning negativity, negative actions, which are the habitual tendencies to not complete deeds will also continue, and the fully ripened effect will be pain, the suffering of negative actions, which is, and that pain will grow. So there also then you have what's called the proliferating effect of karma, that the effects of an action are always greater than the cause. So there's a lot of cautionary language in this to compare with what you understand of how karma occurs, how actions and their results take place. And so then, and other actions, in other words, we do something halfway, and then we start something else, and we leave that first thing undone, and we start something else. And that is something that will carry on as a habit. And then all our, here it says, things will be left undone, or else will bear a meager fruit. In other words, the full ripening of the karma of the action will never fully occur. Everything will be kind of halfway done, halfway experienced. So this is creates a difficulty, and for the bodhisattva, as a bodhisattva, then of course that incurs a much more magnified downfall for the bodhisattva, because it's not just you, that you're not just, it's not about you, it's that you're failing to live up to your pledge to liberate all sentient beings. So you're like that. Okay, so then, given that, then, therefore, verse 49, Shantideva says here, action, the afflictions, and ability, three things to which my pride should be directed. I will do this, I myself alone. These words define my pride of action. So now here he's saying, therefore, I am deciding to accomplish what I made up my mind that I can accomplish. I am deciding that I will not back off or slacken, or I won't back off until I've accomplished it. So you decide to accomplish it. And then he goes in. The rest of this section then are these three things: action, the afflictions, and ability. So the action is the action you decide to accomplish, the act that you decide to accomplish. And then the afflictions are your determination to not succumb to the afflictions, not succumb to the kleshas. And then ability, then we need to fortify our knowledge or our ability by assuring ourselves that we're able to do it, because we already checked into it. See, we're kind of saying what it is that we need to accomplish an act, and now making sure that those things are supporting the completion of that action. He's using this word pride, and he's going to use it, and I think the translators distinguish it on the next page a little bit more in the way of there's like, what do we say? Maybe not to be blunt, but there's like good pride and bad pride. Okay. And so here, I think this good pride has to do with what's called this confidence, maybe. Anyway, the good pride is what we're talking about right now. And what should that pride be directed towards is to the deed that you're deciding to do, the action you're decided to do, perform, your determination not to be overtaken by the kleshas, and continue to apply your ability to be able to do it. Have the pride of being able to do it. These three things. Again, using in the commentary, there's a metaphor of the sun. That the sun shines, it doesn't choose to shine. It just does it. It does it alone. And it does it in an unobstructed way. And it's done impartially. And living beings on the earth, put their faith in the sun. But the sun itself doesn't need anything. We say, we people and animals, we need the sun, but the sun doesn't need us. And the same with Bodhisattva. A Bodhisattva is the same. Through the skillful means, the compassionate, skillful means, and the wisdom, and they act to liberate sentient beings alone, without waiting to be asked, without hesitation, and they are what are called bodhisattvas, are the great unknown friend of beings. And so this kind of pride, or this is in the category of steadfastness, right? So this kind of pride is what's being referred to here. This is something that is cultivated as kind of a preparatory stage. And it can happen in just a few seconds, but we need to remember these teachings to be able to arouse the intention of these as a preparatory stage in acting. So then, in verse 50, these verse 50 and 51 are commenting about action. This first one in verse 49, basically the task. What is the task? My task. Overpowered by their minds' afflictions, worldly folk are helpless to secure their happiness. Compared with those who wander, I am able. This, therefore, shall be my task. So, when he says worldly folk, meaning just the ordinary, uninsightful way that sentient beings conduct themselves, is that they basically we tend to focus on attaining the fruit of something, not paying attention to the cause. Like when we decide to have a profession, we can focus on that profession just long enough and often enough, but what we're really focused on are the causes that will enable that to be the fruition of our effort. We don't just dream about becoming a doctor and wear a white coat and a stethoscope and walk around thinking we're a doctor, and buy a Aston Martin or some car or something, and these kind of things, thinking we're a doctor. So no, we focus on what are the causes of that. So ordinary people tend to want happiness, but in order to get that happiness, they engage in actions that cause suffering, a cause of misery. Their actions become motivated by greed, hatred, stupidity, and so on and so forth. The afflictions of the mind, the mental afflictions, the kleshas. So what they want and how they're going about getting it are in contradiction. So this is what typically is called worldly folk. And they're helpless to secure even their own happiness. It's like one saw some place where our minds are like a piece of meat, where two dogs are fighting over a piece of meat, with anger and desire. So here we're now just talking about, so compared with those who wander, I am able. So now I have some ability, and particularly as I train my mind in bodhicitta, I will be able to, as a bodhisattva, I will be able to secure the happiness of others. Compared to those who wander, I am able. So we should remind ourselves of that. Therefore, this shall be my task, this benefiting happiness and benefit of all sentient beings, particularly those who we have a kind of an immediate connection with, and also through the unfolding of my own wisdom, I will benefit. So this is our task as a bodhisattvas, this liberating one's own mind through wisdom and liberating the minds of others through compassion. This shall be my task. Then, 51. When others give themselves to low behavior, what shall be my stance in their regard? So when we find ourselves around people who are filled with hatred, or who are competitive, or I don't know, trying to overcome enemies, defeating enemies, or disparaging people, or using bad language, harsh, abusive speech, deceit, stealing, deceiving, all these what's called low behavior or inferior body, speech, and mind actions. What shall be my stance in their regard? I'm actually Shantideva kind of just asked that question. Then he says, in any case, I'll not be arrogant. My best way is to give up such conceit. So he didn't really answer that question. And in the commentary, the Khenpo Kumpel says that what shall be our stance in their regard? There's two ways to interpret that, or alternative. One way is to avoid being drawn into that scene, into that negative scene. And of course, this all has to do with, again, with your capacity that we mentioned earlier. But how should I be? What shall be my stance in their regard would be to avoid those actions, not abandon feeling compassionate for the beings when you see them acting in ways that are harmful to themselves and others. Of course, because of this proliferating effect of karma, that the result of an action is greater than the cause, kind of like the idea of a spark and a forest fire. And of course, the same holds true for virtue. A small act of virtue can yield a very great result. So when we see people engaging in bad behavior, avoid it, and then, of course, we can look at our own mind to see whether we actually have joined mentally in that bad behavior, even whether you're whatever side you're on. Is hatred or greed arise, then training compassion. Of course, it's easy to be compassionate to victims, but to train ourselves to feel compassion for the aggressor, understanding how the karma that's being created by the aggressor will result in much greater action than the aggressor is engaging in. So that's one stance to take, and basically carry out the practice of the 6 perfections in whatever way you can. Generosity, or discipline, or patience. Any of the paramitas apply in a situation where you are rubbing up against people or situations of bad behavior, or even if you hear about it. Also, he says that the alternative also is to help, not just stand idly by. But in any case, if we remain aloof and separate, if we separate ourselves from those engaged in negative action, regardless, then we shouldn't be arrogant or having this negative pride about, I would never do that, and having some kind of pride in that. So for a bodhisattva, the bodhisattva way is to give up conceit, thinking that our actions make us better or superior to others who are behaving badly. Okay, so these two you can look at as having to do with how we should engage in setting ourselves on the task, the work, the action. Then the next verse 52 begins the section that he kind of changes the order here. Now he's talking about, in verse 49, the abilities, our ability, my abilities. And of course here the whole theme is, don't forget, is diligence, creating the atmosphere, the environment, the circumstances for diligence. So now talking about abilities, he talks about the afflictions later. In verse 52, it says, when they find a dying serpent, even crows behave like soaring eagles. Therefore, if I'm weak and feeble-hearted, even little faults will strike and injure me. So if since this has to do with our abilities, if we are kind of weak-hearted or have a low sense of self-worth, a low self-esteem, then we're like this dying snake, who even eagles can feel very like an eagle, even small birds. So, which has to do with that even a small little incident will trigger a huge effect, a negative effect for us. A small fault in our discipline will have a large effect if we're weak-hearted about our own capacity. Therefore, if I'm weak and feeble-hearted, In other words, if I don't, I've already said, if I have a low estimation of my abilities, my self-worth, and then even little faults will strike and injure me as if they were something major. Particularly, you may be talking about the small what is it? When we take the Bodhisattva pledge, the Bodhisattva vow, then there's like major and minor flaws to those vows. Of course, the major vow is, or the number one vow is not to abandon sentient beings. But then there's small things. But if we have a low sense of self-worth, then even those small things are like the biggest, will have the karma of being a big deal. Minor things become major. It's like there's one example they have in Lojong. It talks about donkeys or mules or horses. If they have a scab on their back, then they become an easy target for birds to pick on them, and then they get more pain, just a small little scab. So again, steadfastness. This is the category of being steadfastness and this kind of good pride. Courageous self-confidence. Courageous self-confidence. He called pride. Okay, then in the next verse here, but if depressed, I give up trying. If I abandon my effort because of feeling weakened, or if we have a weak determination at the outset, then if we're depressed and we give up trying to practice virtue, if I give up trying to practice avoiding negative actions, saying like, oh, I've got too many kleshas, I have too much attachment, I have too much anger, these kind of things. I'm always envious if we're like that. But then how can I gain freedom from my abject state? If we don't have that, if we have a weak determination, then how can we become free of them? If we were free of the kleshas at the beginning, then there wouldn't be any need for Dharma. The Buddha taught, and the tradition or the lineage of the teachings were initially taught and have been maintained and practiced for thousands of years now because of the dominance of kleshas in the mind of sentient beings. And particularly, not just sentient beings, but in the minds of the listeners, the students of the Dharma. It's the fact that we have kleshas, the relative fact that we have kleshas, makes us perfect for practicing the Dharma. That's one of the kind of realizations of a Dharma practitioner. After a while, you realize, I thought I was okay. I have so many kleshas, almost uninterrupted from one to another, and because we're gaining insight. So we should be determined to continue to gain insight and see the project through. But if I stand my ground with proud resolve, this kind of determination and persistence, it will be hard for even great faults to attack me. In other words, the big downfalls, even the major downfall of the Bodhisattva vow won't completely destroy. It'll be very easy to renew and purify that vow through confession and making a resolution going forward. So like that, okay? So these two verses kind of are parallel. The one is if you're weak and feeble-hearted, then even a little fault will have a magnifying effect. But if we have a courageous heart in our practice, then even a great faults won't have an effect, you see. So you can take those two in tandem. Oh, yeah. And 54, therefore with a steadfast heart, I'll get the better of my weaknesses, meaning I'll get the better of what I am beginning to perceive as my downfalls that are to be discarded, that are to be uprooted, avoided. But if my failings get the upper hand, this kind of defeated, self-defeated attitude, this if we become defeated by our own weaknesses, our own low estimation of our abilities, if my failings get the upper hand, my wish to overcome the triple world is laughable indeed. And it's absurd to think that we could become enlightened if even these small failings get a grip on us. So we need to have this kind of determination that we will become victorious, like become a victor, like one of the victorious ones, means victorious over the kleshas. So, and then the next verse here, I will be victor over all, and nothing shall prevail and bring me down. So there's no kleshas. We should have this attitude that I will be victorious over all the kleshas in the universe, all the kleshas of the threefold world system, of all the kleshas of the 6 realms of existence. And nothing will bring, no klesha will bring me down, will affect me. The offspring of the lion, the conqueror, should constantly abide in this self-confidence. So now he's really applauding this kind of pride. So we shouldn't feel that that's a flaw. It's what we actually need. I am the offspring of the Buddha. I am the offspring of the lion amongst men, amongst humans. What is the lion? I guess it's king of the jungle. So, so like that, same ideas we have. The conqueror means the conqueror of the maras, the 4 maras. And of course, the enlightened beings they've defeated the 4 maras, the mara of kleshas, the Mara of this attachment to what's called the Skanda Mara, meaning the attachment to the, we're attached to this feeling of a self, just a short way of saying it, that Mara of self-clinging, and then the Mara of complacency, and the Mara of death. These are all factors that have a deadening influence on a Dharma practitioner. And so this kind of, we should reflect on the qualities of the Buddha, like the 37 factors of enlightenment and other ways of approaching it, the 10 powers and so forth, and know how to understand what our goal, what qualities our goal has, and how they will unfold on our path in incremental measures, like we said in the chapter when we take the vow, and I will abide on those levels, and on a step by step I will abide. I will traverse the Bodhisattva path incrementally, step by step. So we should understand that enlightenment itself is fearless. Fearlessness is one of the qualities of the Buddha, and so forth. The offspring of life should constantly abide in this self-confidence. So we should we should always be self-assured in our abilities to practice virtue, and always have a self-assurance in our ability to purify negative actions. That's called diligence, like we say. Purify karma this way diligently, you know. So that's the idea. What we bring to the table when we practice virtue, when we purify karma, when we accumulate merit. So then these, the next few verses are kind of Shantideva's, seem to be those. Yeah, it's his teaching. These verses express the difference between what he's talking about in the wholesome pride and what is the pride that is klesha, which is our own destruction, is our pride, that kind of pride. Say negative, unwholesome pride, and wholesome pride. Though in Tibetan, the word for pride is ngajal. Ngajal means I conqueror, you know. Or I ruler. Jalpo was king, you know. I monarch, like that. I pride. And we know that it's a bendable, not just a bendable term, but that term and the experience of pride has various, like here in the sutras, we need that kind of assurance of our self-worth. And then, of course, in that, I don't want to bring up, but just as an example of the usage of that term, as we say, it's also our downfall, pride as a poison of the mind. And also then pride in the context of Vajrayana, we cultivate that pride in the practices that are in the generation and completion stage practices. We cultivate pride. So pride is a term that and an experience that has a bright sunny side and it has a shadow side. Those whom arrogance, this kind of pride, negative pride, those whom arrogance destroys are thus defiled. They lack self-confidence. They lack the self-confidence that bodhisattvas possess regarding their abilities. Regarding their abilities, bodhisattva has a pride because of understanding the abilities and the quality of the path. But conceit and arrogance cause that kind of self-confidence to not arise. Those who have true confidence escape the foe. In other words, just true confidence, this kind of pride is the antidote to the kleshas. So when you have this kind of confidence, it neutralizes the bad pride, the destructive, unwholesome pride. Those who have true confidence escape the foe. That means the negative pride, while others fall into the power of an evil pride. So if you don't have this kind of bodhisattva confidence, then you will fall into under the power of the, basically you'll fall under the power of your enemy. It will be, that pride will be a defilement to your mind. When arrogance inflates the mind, it draws it down to states of misery, or ruins happiness should human birth be gained. Thus one is born a slave, dependent for one's sustenance, or feeble. Now he's talking about the karmic, all these various aspects of karma that are accruing in the mind of an individual who is arrogant, and how that will ripen into various states of misery, as he says. It ruins happiness, and then even if you should be a human again, you're born like a slave, but basically you're born weak and have to depend on others for your sustenance. Like it means a slave in that sense of the word. Or feeble-minded, ugly, without strength, the butt and laughing stock of everyone. So that's the karmic result, the fully ripened karma and the karma that's in conformity with the cause and so forth. That all the different aspects of karma are being brought out there. Then he says this sentence here, these ascetics puffed up with conceit. If these you call the proud, then tell me who are wretched. So he's kind of talking about people, it seems, that are not really training in, they're unable, or they're not really training in authentic bodhicitta, or without kind of genuine Dharma experience. So if you're calling these the proud, if these are the stable ones, then tell me who are wretched. That's kind of Shantideva's ironic sense of humor. So I think he's noting in the, what is this, the 1,000 years, over, in the 7th century or whenever, Shantideva, they had this was a problem then. So this nothing new. It's just so we want to avoid this by training in a genuine way, and in a step-by-step way. Then 59, those who uphold pride to vanquish pride, the enemy, are truly proud. So those who uphold this self-confidence, this stable self-confidence, upholding pride means to have a stable self-confidence, and we maintain that in order to overcome this ordinary worldly pride, which we always are on guard about. Then that is what's called true pride. They are the victorious ones, the brave ones. They are the ones that are worthy of praise. And they who stem the increase of that evil pride perfect, according to their wish, the fruit of victory for beings. So again, in the positive sense of the word, they who vanquish, those who uproot the klesha, the pride of the kleshas, they're the heroes. So here we can read this in many ways as lessons and understanding, different levels of understanding, but basically we can say that Shantideva here is giving praise to the qualities of a healthy sense of self-worth that antidotes the ordinary defilement of pride. And of course, the thing that what binds all beings to the misery of samsara, to this endless chain of samsara, this wheel of samsara. What binds is the thought of an I. And to overpower, to uproot that mistake, then we need this true self-confidence in our ability. And it's that self-confidence that will overcome the binding force of that belief in an I. Oh, okay, so that's the, so then we've, those verses from from 46 to 59 are Shantideva's presentation of these 2 points here. Action, in verse 49 it says, the action, the afflictions, and the ability. So this was, he kind of changed the order when he presented it. First he talked about the task, the action, and then abilities. So that's what we've covered, is that. Now, in the next few verses, it's self-confidence in regards to the kleshas, to afflictive mental states or mental afflictions. When I am beleaguered by defilements, I will stand and face them in 1,000 ways. So when beleaguered, I should have looked up beleaguered. That's not a, I don't know if I've ever used that word, beleaguered. I suppose it has something to do with when you're kind of overwhelmed or burdened by defilements, which simply means that your perception has connected, has connected, contacted an object, and in the wake of that, your mental consciousness arises, and the karmic process begins, and that gives rise to your klesha consciousness, the kleshas. So it's this interdependent process. So when we notice that that's happening, and of course, the more insight, no, the more, not insight, the more we've trained in the previous discipline section, carefulness and introspection, mindfulness and introspection, these 3 things. Then we'll notice those things will be much more sensitized to that process of making contact, and then our sort of cross-referencing system is triggered, and we start making decisions. Good, get, bad, avoid. This cross-referencing, and then that triggers also our kleshas, our attachment, wanting, needing, these kind of things. So through being careful, knowing what to be careful of, then our body, our speech, and our mind, we're careful, then we notice when we're not being, when these kleshas break through that, the veneer of that carefulness. So I will stand and face them in 1,000 ways. So then, now we're, he's basically he's alluding to the skillful means that we've been talking about. How will you do it? What method will you use to not be afflicted by this attachment or aversion or anger or jealousy or pride? And so then it has to do with what kind of a practitioner you are. How I don't want to say good. How skillful. What are you used to? What have you become used to in the way of practicing? Like a basic, a person with the capacity of a basic, like the basic capacity, would turn away and avoid further, the further arising of defilements, to avoid becoming beleaguered by the defilement. You would avoid it. Don't say anything. Just keep your hands, in your pockets, behind yourself. Put a ice pack on your head. This is I'd say that basic practitioner, that means that they know that there's some harm occurring to their mind. Sometimes you just have to leave as a practitioner. Then of course, average general practitioner then would apply antidotes according to, again, what you've studied and have contemplated, so that you know what to apply amongst the antidotes. What kind of mind training antidote would be appropriate for you at this particular time with this particular level of intensity, so that you're actually antidoting it, not sort of being philosophical about it, but actually antidoting it, so that karma karma ceases, karma stops. So like that. You'll face them in 1,000 ways, meaning that there are many, many ways to antidote the kleshas. I think for a Buddhist practitioner, someone who's taken refuge in the Three Jewels, then their goal, we always talk about, is enlightenment. And at the beginning of our day, we take refuge. At the beginning of our practice, we take refuge. And we orient ourselves towards the goal of enlightenment. And that's just like I mentioned a minute ago about the doctor, wanting to be the doctor. We can focus on that. But then we also have to engage in the path, the cause of that. And so that's one piece. Along with that is also this understanding that Buddhahood, or the Buddha nature, is already perfect. It's already present. It's the nature of mind. It's not the result of a cause. It's already there. It's like the first chapter of Gampopa it's called The Cause. And the chapter is about Buddha nature. It's not about karma. Karma is a function of the path. When we enter a path, we enter the world of, we accept and convert actions. And so what's occurring is that through the path, we are antidoting those factors that obscure that very Buddha nature that is our goal. So we're not actually attaining enlightenment. We are recognizing at a certain point that enlightenment has always, we've always been enlightened. So, oh, I know. So then the kleshas actually become our goal, our target, not enlightenment on the path. All of our Dharma practice is aimed at the kleshas. You see? That's the big difference in people, practitioners or spiritual paths or spiritual, those who aspire for spirituality and things is what is the target of your practice? We really need to identify that. And so we really need to understand and appreciate the kleshas, our afflictions, and brace up to the practices according to our abilities. We just talked about abilities, not just rely on philosophical truisms, and we become kind of like a fanatic. But the path is usually a lot messier than we anticipated, because we're dealing with our afflictions. We're not dealing with purity and unlimited love and compassion, with pure vision, and with we're not really dealing with that. We're dealing with what obstructs that. I'll not surrender to the host of the afflictions, but like a lion I will stand amid a crowd of foxes. Yeah, so we should make sure that our minds are klesha-proof. That we've... And we'll be like a lion, like lions aren't afraid of foxes, and foxes don't attack lions. So we should be like that, like a lion, and ready for any onslaught of the kleshas with the confidence that we will prevail over them. Make our minds klesha-proof in that way. However great may be their peril, people will by reflex guard their eyes. And likewise I, whatever dangers come, must not fall down beneath defilement's power. So just like we protect our eyes, so then dangers, or just like I mentioned, objects that that we make contact with are objects and circumstances. When so we should be we should have self-confidence regarding the kleshas, which are what these verses are, right? So we should have the self-confidence that regardless of the objects that are objects that we are relating to, say, and regardless of the circumstances that whether it's the objects of our desire or objects of our anger, that we won't succumb, we won't fall under their power, but will take measures to antidote those defilements, those afflictions, and we'll have that determination, that self-confidence. Better for me to be burned to death than better to be killed, my head cut off. At no time will I bow and scrape before that foe of mine, defiled emotion. So again, this is from Shantideva, is counseling himself, stirring his, what does he say? He's stirring his spirit by saying that to be burned to death, to be killed, or head cut off, those are mild. Those are mild pain compared to the defiled emotions, the afflictions, the kleshas. So, what is 93? Okay, anyway. So then the next two lines there says, thus, this is a summation. This is the summation of the previous of this section. It says, thus, in every time and place, in any circumstance whatsoever, I will not wander from the wholesome path. Simply put. So it's we should carry out our pledge to never be stained like what do you call it? Like a stain that you can't get out, indelible. Like kleshas won't be like a Sharpie, you know. I will, not wander from the wholesome path. I will never act inappropriately. I will never, I will always act properly according to the precepts that I've undertaken. Again, so then we also need to know what is proper. What are the precepts? What am I expecting of myself? Okay. So that's the end of this section of the implementing favorable conditions for bolstering our vigor or reinforcing those conditions that reinforce our vigor, diligence, aspiration. Now, this steadfastness we've covered. So then we have the other force of joy, relinquishment, earnest practice, and the controlling body, speech, and mind to go that will finish that chapter. I will take up next time. Okay.